Tuesday, August the 15th, 2023. Call to meeting to order at 4 p.m. And I'll ask if there's any disclosure of interest. Hearing none, we have a couple of council members on virtual today. So we'll get right into the reports. Sewer report, porthole pool facility assessment.
So I'll deliver this report
Okay.
on behalf of administration. So every year, the porthole pool is closed during the months of June, July, and August to complete any required maintenance of the facility to prepare it for reopening. In 2023, a professional structural engineer from TBT Engineering and a professional architect from Critchley Hill Architecture were hired to complete an analysis of the structural integrity of the facility. The pool structure was inspected on July the 10th by TBT Engineering. The engineering report was received on July 19th, which was additionally reviewed by Critchley Hill Architecture. The Critchley Hill Architecture report was received on July 21st by the town. Below are the findings from the engineering report. There has been significant loss in the wall gird system, which has compromised the integrity of this load-bearing system. The end steel frame bases show more than 50% of the section area has corroded away, compromising the integrity of this load-bearing system. The roof purlins were not inspected due to height restrictions over the pool, but it should be assumed that since the purlins are subject to the same interior high humidity and chloride conditions, they are similarly affected as stated above. And based on the above noted observations and the age of the structure, the engineering opinion is that the pool area is not safe for continued operation in its present state. Below are the findings from the architectural report. The porthole pool is no longer suitable for public occupancy. To ensure compliance with the latest Ontario Building Code 2012 regulations, the following scope of corrective action must be undertaken. Removal and replacement of all exterior structural purlins, roof deck, exterior walls and roofing, replacement of the pool liner in the main pool, and complete replacement of the therapy, the small pool, upgrading of all HVAC and electrical systems affected by the exterior wall and roof removals, repairing all corroded structural steel column base plates, including necessary repairs to the floor slab and masonry walls affected by the structural work. In addition to the corrective work noted above, as per Ontario Building Code 11.2, 3.2, extensive renovation, scope of work within the suite will be required to comply with Ontario Building Code Section 3.8, barrier-free design. The architecture report does note that no other suite, including the arena, the theater, and the lobby area, is subject to the pool recommendations and may remain open for public occupancy without concern. It is estimated that the time frame required to complete the necessary repairs, as identified in the reports, is approximately 1.5 to 2 years. Financially, an order of magnitude cost estimate was prepared to address the necessary repairs. It notes as follows: construction costs of $2 million, construction allowances of $404,000, professional fees of $387,000, for a total project cost of $3.2 million. Additional project work that is required and not costed in the order of magnitude includes complete replacement of the degraded large pool liner, which is $300,000, interior lighting replacement, $200,000, asbestos removal, $175,000, new HVAC system, $250,000, barrier-free upgrades, $500,000, and markups regarding construction, design, and professional fees, $458,000, for a total additional cost of $1.8 million, bringing the complete overhaul total costs $5.1 million. Well, options to council tonight or this afternoon: proceed with the necessary engineering and design, financing, tendering, and construction to complete necessary repairs to the porthole pool. Do not proceed with the necessary repairs at this time and close the porthole pool to public occupancy. Your administration recommends, due to health and safety and cost concerns, that option B be selected and that the porthole pool be closed permanently.
Thank you very much for that report. I'll open up for any questions of administration. Councilor Suki first.
Yeah, I'll just more or less make a comment. I think, this may not come as a huge shock to some people, but it's, and when discussing a new active living center, the retrofitting of the existing center has been brought up time and time again by its constituents, and it's been, expressed by administration that not likely and not possible, and that was just sort of nice to see a number that exists with that, right? And that's just one recreational area in that whole building, right? So if you're looking at retrofitting, the arena and other parts, doubles or triples that cost, right? Which big pill to swallow.
Councillor Lake?
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, again, I've heard that from lots of folks. What would it be to retrofit? That's the pool, and that's to take it to where it is now. I'm sure there's extra money for retrofitting the entire unit of suites. So it kind of feels like that number is nice to have, and I do agree with that. The one thing I would say is, like, I just feel like the pool has always been the thing that differentiates us from other municipalities. I would say it's not something we need to offer as a municipality. It's not within our necessary things, but it is the thing that makes us unique. So it really is painful to think about it being closed for 2 years. I'm just wondering, could you set out for us the timelines that administration would envision in the two paths? Like, so if we go through, say we have to have it open as soon as possible, what's the timeline and what would that look like? And then what's the timeline for the new ALC that we envision? So just sort of laying out for us really what those two options look like from administration's point of view.
So realistically, looking at retrofitting the pool purely based on the engineering and architectural assessment. Now, we're not talking about dryer prom replacement or any of those items that are also going to be required in the near future. The best estimate is 2 years to get us to be able to open for public occupancy. The active living center, we do expect will be in front of council in October as per our envisioned timelines, with a finalized conceptual design, requesting approval to move forward with detailed design and engineering to be able to tender, likely in the first half of 2024. And there we'd be looking at an aggressive construction schedule, probably of 3 years. So realistically, if council was to approve that in October, I'm confident we would have the active living center open in 4 years.
Councillor Valls?
Thank you, Your Worship. I myself being a huge advocate for the pool when it comes to mental health and stuff like that, are we going to see any supplemental programming coming through the community through other avenues to be able to continue to offer just those outlets for residents and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. We've started some preliminary work on those particular items. What opportunities can we offer additionally, as well as what other opportunities are available in the community we could partner with. So obviously, depending on the decision that council makes today, if council does agree with administration, we would begin those discussions in earnest next week, and look to report back to council in a 2 to 3 week time frame with what that additional programming looks like.
Councillor Lake?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. That's an excellent question from Councillor Valens. I think that is really important. Like, I think about the people that use the pool, and if you have, mobility issues, for sure the pool is really your only option in lots of cases for recreation. I know my own, when I had really young children, that was the place you could go and kind of get them out in the winter. So having something for a residents to do is super important. The two things that I was kind of wondering about were, one, looking at the damage to this facility. I'm just wondering if, in talking to the architect, are there lessons we can learn? It's a terrible lesson, but are there lessons we can learn as we build now in 2023 to sort of make sure we're not here in 40 years and we leave another kind of problem like that? And two is, I'm so conscious of some of the conspiracy stuff that goes on. Now, the folks that identify the problem are the same, I think, folks that we're going to have working on the new ALC. I just would love to dispel that it's not a conspiracy that we found this. It's actually the due diligence of looking at the facility, we uncovered the issue. So I'm just looking to, I've heard a couple of people talk about that. I just wanted to lay those two things to rest. So what did we learn, and what was the process of discovering the issues?
So really, it's a difficult comparison because, you know, pool construction of the 1970s is completely different than pool construction, you know, in 2023 or 2024. You know, really what we've learned is you would never go with a chloride environment, right? Because it's corrosive, right? There's so many other options available for pool facilities, right? Whether it's salt water, whether it's brine, there's lots of different options out there that don't utilize corrosive chemicals. And you'll see that in the active living center designs. So, you know, I think, you know, from a construction standpoint, you know, it's drastically different in 40 years. You know, I would say administratively, one thing that, you know, we've definitely learned is we should have pursued replacement of that facility much earlier than now, right? This is not a problem that showed up, you know, a month ago, right? It has been, you know, conclusive over time, and we knew that. And we got to this point because we didn't deal with it, you know, 10, 15 years ago. So, you know, I think that's a lesson learned as we look at some of the ages of our other facilities that are going to require replacement. Now, from a professional perspective, you know, there can't be a conspiracy theory. You know, both, you know, a professional architect in Ontario and a professional structural engineer in Ontario are guided by extreme ethics and legal responsibilities. So, you know, there's no conspiracy theory. You know, it's their professional opinion. They've issued the recommendation for closure. Administratively, right, we support that. You know, now council can choose to go down a different path, but from a liability perspective, you know, our responsibility is to report back to you on what the professional recommendations are.
Yeah, also, Councillor, for clarification, anybody who utilized the facility over the years, and we've known this from our own staff through maintenance programs that every year has been maintained, there's been structural damage on the bottom of the beams that we've repaired. This year, staff went in and said, we better do a little more investigation with our supervisor, and they did, and they pulled back some of the foam insulation, as we know, spray on, and then we started to see it. And then when the engineer came in and identified all the issues, we did a tour just for the public's information. We need to see ourselves, and there's a lot of damage, a lot of structural damage, and we're not engineers. You can see visually the damage within that facility and the integrity being compromised. So conspiracy theories out there, you know, people can say what they like to say, but Mr. Skorczynski is absolutely right in regards to the ethics of those people. The report back to council was about the safety of the public, and this decision is for council to make based on our role as leaders in the community. So we'll have debate and we'll decide what that looks like, but the reality is a structure is not safe to be in for the public.
Thanks, I appreciate that clarification.
Councillor Valens.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, we don't necessarily want to be another northern community that sees something drastically terrible happen, right? So with that being said, just to kind of help dispel, I guess, some more concern, what will it look like for residents who have active living memberships? Mr. Skorczynski, will that still need to be addressed? Will that come out in the next few weeks? How will that all play out?
Yeah, we had that meeting this morning, and depending on the outcome from council, we'll start that process, what it looks like over the next week. Of course, communicate that, you know, if council chooses that the pool is no longer part of our suite at the recreation complex, of course, there will be refunds. But it'll take us some time to work through the logistics of offering those. But certainly that would be something we start on right away.
So one thing just to take in consideration, and you're looking at the $5,100,000 replacement of the structural part of the facility, as Mr. Skorczynski said, and Mr. Paris told us at the discussion, we went to the facility, the Drytron and every other part of that facility, as we all seen it in that room, it's pretty rough. So if you're going to do this work to bring it up to speed, you're going to have to spend another 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 million, whatever that looks like, to replace that piece of the equipment. So you might be in it for double this amount. And I'm just throwing it out because we haven't got those numbers, but we all seen the structure within that facility, what it looks like, and it's in pretty rough shape as well. So considering all that, and if you were really to look at all those numbers, I think you don't need to look at those. You need to make a decision based on the best business model for the community going forward with that 5 million in front of us, considering you're going to have to do the other portion, you're going to invest that kind of money to make sure that that continues to operate properly, because that is not it as well. And it was identified of the the small pool being replaced as well, and the big liner. But there's also some other structural issues within the pool itself for seepage, which we'll have to identify that could bring an added cost to this facility as well, because we know there is some drainage, loss of water supply in that building, so we have yet to identify that. Councilor Suki.
Yeah, thank you, your worship. No, I absolutely agree with that. I think I've already kind of alluded to this in my previous comment, but having some municipal members like see the numbers involved with just this one little project, this fix, I think if at all possible, say we retrofit that entire building plus do this required work of $20 million plus, it can help maybe put them in the mindset of, maybe spending 60 or triple that onto a new active living center will help, swallow that pill a little bit, because it is a huge number. It's a scary number, but if you look at 20 million plus to retrofit the entire complex on top of the portable pool, it maybe gives them a little bit of insight to help with that decision. And then whatever the fate of the portable pool is after this, like you said, administration look back at it, I think it does provide opportunity for different programming and targeting different population groups, right? I see it in my professional life, seniors that use and require the pool, right, for fitness and activity, giving them something else that can help.
Councilor Lake.
Yeah, you know what, I guess I'd like to kind of echo that idea that the number, I mean, I think all of council has been very clear all along that we all support recreation and we want to see a facility for residents. That's an integral part of the community we want to see. So as I suss out the options here, I kind of see, I guess, one, we could close the pool and just have an arena. That's one thing you could do. Two, you could fix up the pool. We know that that's $5 million now, which wouldn't make a lot of sense to not also do the work on the whole building. So that is a number that I think is probably important for the context of a new ALC. And I'm certainly not looking for a Class C cost estimate, but I think that Councillor Suki is right that number is an important one for me to make the case for an ALC, which again is obviously the most amount of money, but probably the thing that I would do in my personal life if I had something like this happen to me. The other question, and obviously the most important one to administration, is how are we doing as we look at financing and paying for a new ALC? Because if we can't get that piece in line, then it's one of the other two options. So I'm just say that those three numbers seem important to me, and then really administration's got to let us know, whether that new ALC number is attainable for our municipality or not.
So with that being said, Council, we've had many discussions around that, and we know that administration can be bringing back the report in the fall, and we will be meeting with Minister Surma in London coming next week to discuss that. Councillor Wheeler and Mr. Skwarczynski and myself. We hope to have some movement. We'll also be reaching out to Minister Hajdu and seeing what programs are going to be available. We're also going to be working with various other consultants in regards to funding models for grants and subsidies. So we don't have that number and package in regard to what does that look like for our municipality until probably, I want to say maybe late fall, early 2024, like January, February, for best case scenario. But we know we're working behind the scenes on all those things. And what does that look like? We'll hopefully have an answer sooner than later, but we know what the answer is in regards to the build. We've already had those discussions with administration, 56 to $64 million. 56 is the ALC arena, pool, and theater. 64 was the arena, pool, theater, and some landscaping and potentially a bowling alley complex, but that's plus. We know the basics we need in this case is the $56 million based on the consultant's number for 2024 build, tender build, start build. So we can certainly bring that number back in the fall once we have more details through administration and meeting with government and officials and class B or A final design, and we'll go from there. Correct? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the final design will be coming to council in the fall. But to answer Councillor Lake's question, because it's a valid one. If we look at the building envelope that we currently have, right, the entire facility needs to be replaced. It's 40 years old. It's 3 different buildings put together. We see from, that question was asked, what have we learned from this? We've learned that we can't retrofit that facility. we're probably realistically, if we can even do it, anywhere between 30 and $40 million. We have a facility that leaks when it rains. We have an electrical system in the arena that is at maximum capacity that we cannot put any more circuitry in. We have an ammonia plant that needs to be replaced. Simcoe was here and told us they could no longer replace or fix what we have. So to look at, as a comparison, and we say it's going to be a $40 million retrofit versus a $60 million build on the borrowing side of things, which isn't included in the $5 million for the pool, it's not drastically different. So, our administrative caution to council would be, we have a facility that needs to be replaced.
Well, I think, Council Lake, we've already had that discussion. This is just an eye opener. We didn't believe the pool was that rough, and now that we see the engineer's report and what we've seen visually ourselves as council, that we have to accept that report. I mean, it's we're not engineers, but when we see the structural damage and the structural integrity that's been rotted away from rust, because it was all hit. And I look behind me and behind you, Mr. Paris, there's 3 individuals who used the pool. They also see that structure, the amount of foam that's built on those beams was all hidden. We didn't see it until you start pulling the foam off the beams, and we all seen what it looked like. It's pretty rough, right? It's pretty rotted. So the integrity is not there. We know that. That's not the argument. What we need to know is what would we do? We close it or we retrofit it? And I think administration has made it very clear what our answer is.
For sure.
Councilor Suki.
Would, just out of curiosity, would that $40 billion, the retrofit be like a reasonable, like rough number of what it would cost?
Yeah, it's certainly not a Class A estimate, but, based on what we're seeing, from, construction of the works garage. We have the recent example of the golf course clubhouse, the Peninsula Manor. There's lots of examples. I know, in speaking with Mr. Brown, some of the construction costs coming in for the long-term care facility, that's a reasonable estimate. And,
That's a good number for them, for people to know, right?
And, concerns that we would have administratively from, a maintenance perspective is, as we saw in the pool, you start to peel away layers. You really don't know what you're gonna find because things have been patched for the last 30 years.
That's really.
I would also be assuming that we could get into a situation where we spend a couple $1 million and then we get another engineering report that says you're closing it for sure.
This is very preliminary.
Yeah,
There's no question.
that would be my concern. It would be spending money, getting a couple years into this process and then still not having a pool.
And even with, this, assessment and those costs, right? It's still a short-term solution.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's a 1970s steel clad building, right? So, the dressing rooms, the washrooms, nothing is barrier free in that facility. And there is going to become a time, right now it would be 2012 building code. There's going to become a time soon where it's not going to be 2012 building code. It's going to be something more modern. And you're even looking at more costs for accessibility and barrier free. So it's just not reasonable to think that facility could be reopened in its current state.
Well, I think it was identified in regards to the engineer's report, in regards to the roof purlins were not inspected due to the height and restrictions of the pool. So that this time we just assumed since the other part, so they can't guarantee. So you're absolutely right, Councilor, that we might be into bigger dollars when you start ripping off everything else in that regard. Councilor Balance.
Will there be an official memo or report coming out to the public as an education piece as to why the decision was made, with pictures and just like brief facts as to what made the decision and or the reason as to why the decision was made, so that it will dispel a lot of false narratives, especially on social media, how we know things just blow up on social media?
It's not our administrative practice to share those reports from a legal and liability perspective. The public report that administration has presented to council has the findings of the report in it verbatim. So we're not hiding anything. Exactly what the engineer and the architect has said is what we presented tonight. Immediately following council's decision, we will be posting these reports publicly.
Yeah.
And that's what the reports state.
I think that's fair, Councilor Balance, that we're taking the advice of a structural engineer, and we make a decision based on the best interest of the safety of the community members within our community. So we're not professionals. We don't have the understanding of that, but we expect from the engineer's point of view that they made the right decision, and we got to abide by that. Councilor Lake.
Yeah, thank you. And that was a good question. I mean, I'll just speak for myself. Like I have been on record of saying I'd like to see a new ALC. I think that's the path forward. I like developing that waterfront. I think that's the project. My only fear, and it was the question about the timeline, is this: making a decision now about the facility and then finding out potentially that there's no way we can afford that new building. My hope is administration is going to find, politically we'll find some money and administration will find ways to finance it. But how can we ensure that as we move forward with that, if we do get, word that we can't do it, that we keep all of our options open? I guess that was what I was wondering about around timelines. I would like to see us progress to the new ALC. That's my preferred option. As sad as it would be to see the pool close, I don't want to spend money on that building. That's lipstick on a pig. But how do we, I guess this is the question for administration, how do we keep options open while pursuing that path?
So can I answer that? Because I think council like that, we have to wait until we get all the data in front of us. So that means into, the fall, early 2024, we as council can work with administration and make the proper decision based on the items in front of us. So if you just said we don't get the funding, does that mean we scale back the ALC to meet more affordability for the community based on, potential future taxation, sponsorship, whether it's government grants? So we don't know any of those answers yet, so it's a moving target. So to ask administration to give us a detailed answer, I think that's unfair. I think we can come back in the fall, early spring, early new year, and have more details around funding options, grants, subsidies, corporate sponsorship. What does that all look like? And then we can make a good, clear decision on what the new facility is going to look like.
So can we then say the decision now is not a final decision? We're closing the port. Well, I will vote to close the porthole pool until all the facts are in, and then we'll move forward. It's not I just want to make sure we keep our as many options open as possible.
So I think what you're saying, if I don't mind, is putting words in your mouth, is that you don't want us to start tearing down the porthole pool until we have all the details and facts and finance. Okay, I think council is very clear on that. We're not going to start tearing the pool down next week. We're going to wait and see where we are in the new year, where we are with financing funding. Mr. Skorchinski.
Yeah, just to put that to bed, we're not recommending tearing the facility down, right? It's not a facility that is going to fall down, right? It's a facility that's not suitable for public occupancy. There's, a legal definition difference between the two. Now, from a new active living center perspective, the mayor is completely correct. We can't say with confidence to council right now, this is how 60 million is going to be funded. But what we can say with confidence is the process we've utilized, and we've engaged in to this point in time positions us to build a facility, right? It's not going to be starting over if council says we can't afford 60 million. We need to do a $30 million building. Right? Nothing is going to be lost, the work we've done to date. It's just going to be a readjustment of that work. So the work we're doing now and what's been budgeted in 2023 is valuable.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? So I'm going to ask, two members on the virtual screen to give me their opinion on whether or not this is going to go forward, or we just we close the facility.
So I can speak to that one here. I think it's pretty clear that the facility, as much loved as it is, doesn't really warrant $5 million being spent to bring it to a place where it still is a 40-year-old building. So I would certainly vote to move forward, looking at the new ALC and to close the porthole pool as is.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Valens.
Yeah, unfortunately, I vote option B.
Okay.
With a strong support for recreation and moving forward in the right pathway, as Councillor Lake said.
Sorry, and just to go with Councillor Valens here, can we offer, I don't know much about lifeguarding anymore, but can you offer swimming at Penn Lake with lifeguards, or are those different types of lifeguarding? I don't know.
It's a different certification. We could look at it, but it's not the same as being an indoor pool.
So before I go any further, I just want to make sure that Councillor Valens moved the motion that due to the health and safety reasons of the cost concerns of the porthole pool will be closed permanently. You both give an answer. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, option B.
Yes.
Okay, so all in favor of the facility as of, won't be reopening, but as of today, we'll make a public notification that, as Mr. Skorchinski stated, we'll post the engineer's report online. And of course, we'll do media, but I'm sure that the media will be reaching out to me and then Mr. Skorchenski. We'll give them the best overview as we possibly can in regards to the decision made today. Thank you, Gary. Okay, next we have a 2023 report treatment plant enclosure results. So Mr. Paris.
Thanks, your worship and council. In front of you have a report for the 2023 sewage treatment plant enclosure results. As the background, the town of Marathon 2023 sewage treatment plant contact chamber and closure request for quotation was issued with a closing date of June 20th, 23, which included a mandatory site meeting. The project was originally budgeted at $213,562. On July 6, 2023, 4 contractors were present for the mandatory site visit. The RFQ request for quotations closed on July 20th, 23, with only 2 bids being received. And just to inform council, this was publicly announced in all of Ontario, which reaches out to the entire country, country of Canada and province of Ontario. On July 6, the original project design and budget was a fabric liner, and fabric liners have a life expectancy of 15 years, while a steel pre-engineered building will have a life expectancy of 50+ years. Administration is proposing that the sewage treatment plant enclosure be redesigned, was to be redesigned to a pre-engineered building with full concrete footings to increase the life expectancy of the concerns with wind loading based on the proximity to Lake Superior. The report contains attachment that has information regarding the current conditions of the sewage treatment plant contact chambers, which there were some pictures enclosed. The final financial implications, the quote received from Northern Waterworks is $224,765 plus HST, which included a town contingency of 5% for the fabric liner project. RML contracting quote is $456,237,000 for steel structure and full concrete footings with a pre-engineered building, garage doors, and man door. The cost to retender in 2024 with RML contracting is estimated to be $482,308. Our option A, proceed with the quote from Northern Waterworks, including the fabric liner. Option B, proceed with the quote from RML Contracting with a pre-engineered steel structure with full concrete footings, and retender the project in 2024 with an escalation fee of 6% for construction costs.
I have a motion.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Sorry.
And other sheet got mispiled
Yeah.
here. So for recommendation, your administration recommends option B. Select that RML Contracting be instructed to proceed with the design and design engineering immediately.
Okay, so thanks. I have a motion here that the council hereby supports the attached report and recommendation of 2023 sewage treatment plant enclosure results, and further that RML contractor be instructed to proceed with the design engineering immediately. Moved by Councilor Seague, second by Councilor Wheeler. Questions? Councilor Fouquet.
So with obviously your recommendations are expensive, you double the cost. They gotta do it again in 15 years. They got 30 years of life expectancy at over the price of what you get for potentially 50 years. So that price is no brainer. How does this get paid? Is like we have reserves or like maybe have savings?
So there are reserves, especially for water and wastewater.
Yeah.
And maybe just to elaborate a little bit more on here, when you look at a fabric liner, we talk about lessons learned. And, you know, we're doing WTS, which is Waste Transfer Station right now. We've replaced that one with a pre-engineered steel building. So as we look at those lessons learned and coming on board, and, you know, just for council to understand, this was in, you know, the budget for a couple of years, and finally, you know, I paid a little more attention to it. So, you know, we're going to end up with the same issues we're having. So trying to learn from lessons in the past, moving forward to pre-eng building. And maybe to understand the location for why we need these lids, because on the original design of the sewage treatment plant, there were no lids. And there was issues, and I did some research on Ontario Clean Water and Northern Waterworks, and the issues have come in the past where it was freezing in the last chamber for the contact chamber. So that used to be chlorinated. We don't use chlorine anymore, but that contact chamber where the assembly is, where we're looking at putting the enclosure on, is the area where the final stages of solids settle before the effluent is dispersed into Lake Superior. And the other thing that has changed also in, we look at technology and how we're sampling. So right now, our current practice of sampling the final stages of the effluent, we do 3 samples a day at 100,000 mils a day manually. We have already purchased the automatic samplers, which we want to put automatic samplers in. We've already invested 40,000 into that cost. These automatic samplers will take 50 mils throughout a 24, up to 3,000 milliliters over the course of a 24-hour period. So we'll start getting a lot more true representation of the effluent plant as we're dealing with all the discharge into Lake Superior. We also looked at, because of the freezing, that's why they had those original ones put in. And usually happens during the evenings in the winter. Of course, it'd be winter, during low peak demand. So everyone goes to bed, the low peak of the waste goes through, and that's where they were seeing freezing. So a little history of why those original wooden lids were put in. Those wooden lids do not comply with any form of legislative requirements for a building structure. So there's no way we can go back to that structure. And then our learning lessons from the fabric liner is why we're recommending going with pre-edged steel. And then just so you guys also know, the next closest bid out of the 2 bids was an additional 75,000.
So Councillor Lake?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Certainly, I think that's a good argument. I think that Councillor Bounce pointed out that, or sorry, Councillor Suki, that you spend the money now, but long-term, you're going to save it back. Good to hear where the funding comes from. I'm just wondering, I feel like, when did we put the liners in now that need to be replaced? Because I feel like we just put the wood on, feels like yesterday, but it's probably been 10 years or so. So we know it's not lasting very long anyway, right? So that 15 years may even be shorter. So you may see 4 repairs by the time the steel is done. Is that kind of the difference in value?
Oh, the current facility and the pictures, you'll notice they were made out of pressure treated lumber. And you know, the beams going across are not rated for walking on. All these aspects come into play. So it's not even number 1 compliant to be using. But the fabric liner is different from the it's still a liner building, just like you would see at the Public Works for the sand salt shed. That was the original, what was recommended by Northern Waterworks to go with a liner. And then as we did more investigation and learning lessons, we want to recommend going to a pre-edged steel building.
Okay, good, got it.
We did the tour, so you put the new, on the clarifier chambers, we put new roofs on that a couple years ago, right? The 2 big domes. The chambers, when we looked at those with the wooden chambers, and we did where the slurry and the sludge comes out and we put it to the drying beds, those chambers there is where, as Mr. Pierce identified. I'm concerned about the $400 and some odd $1,000 for replacement when we cannot, why can't we just put steel lids back on rather than the wood and just have the same system but with steel light aluminum beams, rather than having a building built over top of these chambers? Because that's a lot of money, $482,000 plus HST, which we get back, 87 or 93% of it regardless. But are we building an overkill building is what I'm getting at.
Great question, Your Worship. One item also remember is that facility, we're sampling in there, we're working in that environment every day. So now the minute you cover that, now you're dealing with snow removal all the time throughout the entire winter, as you have to, access hatches and everything else. By closing the entire area, it's going to allow the operations, whether, we contract it out. So right now it's Northern Waterworks or Ontario Clean Water to have accessibility as they're doing checks, maintenance and sampling.
So I fully appreciate that. I'm just an old school guy. Like I look at the chambers that have been covered for some 37 years with plywood and wood, and I see that they're rotten. But the new structure could be just metal, aluminum, lightweight with contact chambers, sampling doors at periodic spots. That probably can maybe save us, $300,000. In the same systems, it's just not a building. A building is going to be, to me, my personal view is an overkill. It'll be there for 50 years. I fully appreciate that and agree with you on that. But at this time, that's a lot of money to spend for a building that I think is just to protect the workforce or the contractor from not getting into the snow situation. That's just an opinion. So I see, why can't we just replace it with the same?
It also allows for a better inspection of how the contact chamber works. Right now, it's all closed in. You don't really know how things are going. So as we have the circulation of the last stages of the effluent, it's open, you can see it, you can visually inspect it. right now, when it's under closed doors, it's a bit difficult. So you know, we've experienced some odor this year. And now you can have a better visual of what's really happening with your solids in there.
Mr. Skorchinski first.
Just to, you know, to provide another option to council, you know, this is certainly something, you know, you could defer for a short period of time. You know, it's something we need to move forward with. There's no question. There needs to, you know, but we are talking about, you know, $60 million for a new active living center. You know, and it's an important question, you know, so, you know, council could defer this, you know, until the fall, you know, when we have you know, we'll start our capital budget literally within the next month. And have a pretty good understanding of what that looks like for 2024. And could bring this back to council at that time, you know, to look at, you know, what is required. We could also do some additional research, you know, as the mayor has requested. But we wanted to bring this forward to council today, you know, as much for approval as it is for information, to once again point out, you know, these original, you know, these costs that are originally budgeted are coming in double, right, what those construction costs were. So just want to flag that for council, that this is something that we could defer for a few months as we work through some of these other projects. But also to make it real that, you know, these are, you know, that water, the sewage plant's 1983, right? We have to start thinking about capital replacement. And that's why, you know, we do build water and sewer reserves, so we can fund these projects out of reserves and not through the tax base.
And I appreciate that for sure, Mr. Skorchinski. In regards to that, I think that if we've all done a tour of the facility. You haven't had the
That was my
opportunity
next
yet.
question, if you could do a tour to
Sure,
the board.
and I think to go see the understanding of the chambers, the way they're covered, so you get a
Yeah.
visual. And then visualize the building around it, then you see whether or not that's something you can support, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate your comment about maybe putting it off till September's meeting. And look at that, and then, maybe we can have a better view of what does that look like for us to go forward? Because, or even deferring it to 24 and looking at, look, I know it's a 6% increase based on the numbers that you've presented here, but, you know, what does that look like? Because we did budget the 200 and so thousand in this year's budget.
That's right. So this would be an additional 220.
But I think at the same time, we need to have a visual in our minds. Is that fair? To say, we know where the chambers are, the contact chambers are these things here. This is what happens in here, as Mr. Paris identified. But then we have a clear picture. Is that everybody good for maybe a meeting? We can go down half an hour one day and take a peek.
Yeah, we'll schedule, being mindful of everyone's vacation here.
Early
And
September.
we try to coordinate something. We couldn't get some dates. We'll definitely schedule something for the early part of September. And also we'll give you an understanding of the process and how everything works there at the same time.
And at the same time, maybe take advantage of the pump houses and all that we didn't get advantage, take an opportunity to see all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's all part of that.
Okay, good. Okay,
And what I can do is,
we'll just defer, you can tell
Defer
that
to
the
that.
contractor know that.
what I was gonna say, maybe we could give the wording to the contract, we defer it till September
Right,
and see if he can lock in this price. And get that wording in the same, we'll bring it to council meeting and this, at the end of September, or the next September meeting after we reviewed it.
perfect. And if
So we'll see if we can lock it in at that point. The contractor may extend his bid past the 30-day.
Great. So with that being said, I'll ask Council Suki, Council, a second, it's just the table this for the time being.
Not table, your
Oh,
worship.
yes, just the defer, sorry, yes, I don't want to table it, so I'll take it off the table. Defer till the next meeting in September, or the second meeting in September. Thanks. Up next, we have a report on the Canada Housing Mortgage, facility for tiny homes, Mr. Skorchinski.
Yeah, so this is just, we're just looking for a council motion. So we've been, our economic development officer, myself and our contract planner. So the federal government through Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation came out with the Housing Accelerator Incentive Fund. And we've been working diligently on an application which is due on August the 18th. A requirement in that application is to have a council resolution approving the submission of the application. The areas that we're focused on, as per our strategic plan, looking at the tiny homes concept that we've envisioned in the former Trader Court area. Looking at infill development, so infilling in areas within the municipality that we have vacant lots. Completing a housing needs assessment. You know, what do we, you know, if we envision, you know, Marathon growing in the future, what is our housing mix going to need to look like? Looking at an incentive for affordable housing. So, you know, if we need to offer below market, as an example, in the tiny homes concept, you can apply for incentives to help offset that cost. And then the final area, looking at an electronic permitting system, from a building permit perspective. So, we would move away from paper transfer and everything would be submitted online through an online portal and approvals happening that way. So, it's approximately a $1 million application. We don't need to come up with the funds upfront. The way that it works is it's formula based on the number of points that you score in the application. So that's much further down the road. At this point, we need council's approval tonight to submit the application on Friday, make sure our project gets into the queue. And that's what administration is requesting tonight, is
Okay.
that motion approval.
Yeah, I need a mover second to put the motion on. Councillor Wheeler, second. I got Councillor Wheeler, Councillor Stuckey, thanks. I'll read the motion and we can talk about it. That council hereby accepts the attached report and recommendation on the Marathon Housing Accelerated Project Funding Submission, Tiny Homes Housing, Needs Assessment, Affordable Housing, Electronic Permitting, Systems, and Infill Housing. And that the council supports project application to Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Questions, comments? No?
Good
Councillor,
question. So when you get the funds, or sorry, let me backtrack. When you submit the application, you have to allocate how much funds will go to which initiative? Or say you get like the X number of dollars back and at the time you find the tiny homes project more suitable, you divert like 750,000 to that, then 250,000 into the building permits, like you can allocate the funds.
We can't necessarily allocate the funds, but the way that you submit your application is it's based on a point system. So you put your highest points total based on the project that requires the highest amount of funding. So in our example, Tiny Homes has scored the highest within our application. So, if we got $10 as an example, 7 goes to Tiny Homes. So that's the way the application, the funding actually lays itself out.
and I think that also incorporates the tiny home scenario as well as affordable housing, because there are a lot of people who can afford to build a $60,000 tiny home and more than comfortable living in a 400 square foot home, but they can't afford a 300,000 or, 1,000 square foot home. So it makes a lot of sense for the affordability as well. So, and we got the location and it's actually a nice place to redevelop.
Yeah, and just a couple of other points of interest for council. We have a delegation with Minister Clark on this exact topic next week at AMO. And we've our contract planner, obviously, we're going to be working on our new zoning bylaw and official plan next year. It's required for update in 2025. We've already started working on the wording to incorporate this concept into our new official plan. So work's well underway.
Absolutely. We've identified as part of our council strategic plan as an item we want to see completed over the next 4 years. So great. And hopefully we get some success in this program. With all that being said, I'll call the question. All in favor? Barry?
Yep.
Good. Very much. And that's it. So we will do a media release as Mr. Skorczynski said. We'll put the information from the structural engineer on the website, and you'll all have that information, which you already have seen. So you can answer any questions the public might have of you, and we'll do a media release, obviously, with media in regards to the decision made tonight for the pool. It is I use the facility lots with my family as well, and it is going to be a sadly missed facility in our community, but it is what it is. Councillor Lake?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, beyond the media release, would it be possible to contact the user groups? I'm thinking like the swim team and some of the other groups that use the facility, just to sort of personally convey, our sadness, but also to let them know that the upcoming season won't happen.
Yeah, I think, administratively, what we'd like to do is start, is take, a week to process things like, how is my refund going to be, administered? So we have all those, so whether, it's a public meeting we have with users and meet individually with user groups. If administration, you can give us a week or two to put that in place, I think, that would be more favorable than trying to do things one-off.
So it's like it'll hit the street probably as we speak right now that it's out there, but so those user groups will have concerns, and I'm sure they'll be contacting administration first thing in the morning to get the answer. So that'll probably happen sooner than later, besides us putting that out. But Mr. Skorczynski and the team will work diligently in regards to having that information passed on properly to the user groups. Okay. So move by Councillor Wheeler, second by Councillor Lake, that we adjourn at the hour of 4:45 p.m. All in favor? Thank you very much and have a good night.
Good night, guys.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank Okay, good night.